Hey all, welcome back to Kick Punched, where we are building this Gollum character, and this is kind of where we're at this point. I just want to point out there that I got a new mic, so hopefully my audio is a little bit cleaner, and you can hear this bassy, beautiful voice a little bit better. So, in this video, I think we're going to go through the posing process. We're going to continue to further detail. One of the things that's been driving me crazy is the size of his teeth. So I'm going to alt left click on those and push in, and then grab my move topological brush and start kind of just adjusting the size of these a little bit, making those a little bit less intrusive. He's not an orc, you know. He's Gollum. He's got some dignity, a little bit of dignity. And he's not far off from a hobbit, as they say. So I'm going to try and get these teeth normalized just a little bit and just kind of having those peek through his bottom lips as opposed to just being such a prominent feature in his face. I think that's looking a little bit better. Let's adjust some of his proportions just a little bit. We're going to go with his upper ab area and just kind of pull those up towards his pectoralis muscles just a little. Round those out. Just the shape just a little. One thing to keep in mind too as you're sculpting is just to always remember that, you know, small, medium, large detailing kind of help your brain to compartmentalize the detailing. We want to achieve kind of a roundness to some of these details and also some creasing to add to the stylization. So I'm going to come through and accentuate that just a little bit using my Damien standard brush, and I'm just holding Alt to pop out the details. I'm going to Control D this character just once so we have more subdivisions to work with. And if I come over here to geometry, we're at 5 subdivision levels. If I mouse over the subtool, it tells us we're at about just over 3.3 million polys, which is a reasonable amount. I'm going to drop my intensity down and push in his ribcage just a smidge. So we're getting into a good spot with this character. We're getting to the point where we're getting to kind of the smaller to medium detail, which is always a good thing, because that implies that, you know, none of the larger stuff is really catching our eye. So we're doing a good job there. Okay, so I think that's all we're going to do before jumping into the pose. So I'm going to hit save. By the way, let me know how my audio is sounding. Let me know if this expense was worth it. I've done a few tests and I've been pretty happy with it. Not that my voice is the cleanest and smoothest of voices. I've got some terrible acid reflux that causes me to have issues with that. But anyway, I'm an old man and just complaining. So we're going back to the concept here. And this is the pose we're going to try to achieve. And it's a pretty drastic pose from what we have now in our classic T pose. What we're going to start as we usually do, and what I like to do is come into my character and start posing from the body out to the extremities. So if you'll remember, we kept this character in a clean topology. So if I hit Shift D and go all the way down, just keep holding Shift and hitting D, it'll go down to our lowest subdivision level. If I hit Shift F, we'll see that we retain that clean topology. We also have control over these various polygroups. And we're not going to need this granular of a control, so what I'm going to do first, and you'll understand this later on when we start posing, but if I mouse over one of the vertices in this purple loop and hit Control Shift and then left click on one of those, it'll make that the visible group. Now if I Control Shift left click and drag, it'll invert my selection, and I'm going to continue holding Control Shift left clicking on this group, and probably on this group, and then Control Shift left click and drag to invert the selection. And now with this selection visible, what I want to do is come over here to visibility and click this shrink visibility once. And what that does is that, you know, removes the other polyloops from that visibility. So What I want is that for this to all be in one poly group, so I'm going to hit Control plus W on my keyboard to make that one poly group. And just trust me, this is something that's going to be helpful to us while we're posing our character. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to mouse over one of these verts, Control Shift left click, and then instead of switching back to the others, I'm just going to click grow, 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 grow. And then when I start to see these other colors on these edges, I'm just going to hit Control W. And so we're going to have control over this and over this easily. And then I think for the hand, we'll just do Control Shift left click, grow once, and then hit W. And I think let's do this. Let's do this one more time with the hand. Okay, so we've got rough control over the fingers. Let's do this with the thighs too. So we're gonna hit grow, grow, grow. Actually, instead, let's just add, let's do Control Shift left click on this guy, and then this guy, and then we'll just add these guys, Control W, all into one poly group. Let's add some more actually. We'll add these guys as well. And maybe Control Shift left click, and then I'm going to change my selection to the lasso tool, and then Control Shift left click and hold Alt while I'm holding Control and Shift. It'll switch it to red and send that to the other visibility, and then I'm just going to Control Shift left click or Control W that to make that a poly group. And I think we need the shins also. Grow, grow, grow. Control W. Sending that one over, and then Control W that too. So now we have pretty good control over our different joint sections when we start posing. I'm gonna let's add this guy. Let's add the torso and the back part of the torso because those are different colors. Make that the same color. Control W, and I'm gonna grow this visibility to get those loops, and hit Control W again. And sometimes it makes it the exact same color as neighboring groups. And if you want to change that, you just hit Control W again, and it'll make that change for you. So for this neck, I want that, let's say, to be purple. And the color doesn't necessarily matter so long as it's differentiated from the neighboring poly groups, so we can see that we have that control. So now he's got this cool like wife beater tank top in green, and this is going to help us as we're posing. I'm going to hit save real quick. Always remember to save. And I'm gonna start hunching his body, because if we look at our concept, he's very hunched over. So I'm going to hold Control and grab my mask lasso, and then with symmetry on, so it'll grab both sides. You know what I'm gonna do? Let's do this. Let's send this guy over to Transpose Master first. So we will go ahead and do that. Let's turn off the hair first and turn off his loincloth, and we'll keep everything else on. And that way, when everything visible in this subtool is going to be sent over to Transpose Master. So if I go to Z plugin, click on Transpose Master, and go to T-Pose Mesh. This is going to throw everything in and combine it into one subtool for us. And what this is going to do is allow us to more easily pose our character and then send it right back to our other subtool. So let's continue masking like we did before with the control left click lasso, and blur our mask by control left clicking and tapping on the mesh, and then invert our selection by control left clicking outside. And we're going to switch our position of our pivots to right here in the rib cage, and then rotate that character, or his rib cage down a little bit. I'm going to clear my mask, and now I'm going to grab right here on his neck and his head area, invert the selection, blur that mask, and move my pivot to right here, because he's going to be looking up towards camera. And then we've pretty much got his, if we alt tab over to our concept, we're getting pretty close. Let's start by bringing his arms in now. So one fancy thing you can do is if you click on this gizmo again, it'll give you the legacy transform gizmo. This is the older transform gizmo, and I'm glad that they've kept this in the software. I hope they don't get rid of it because it's pretty valuable. So if I want to start masking his arm and this whole thing, if I hold Control, left click, and drag along those normals, it'll start to kind of try to follow the topology. And this saves us a lot of time, so we don't have to just draw mask lassos and stuff. So I'm going to try to make sure, I'm going to rotate around, make sure it's got the back, make sure I've got all the arms in there. And then I'm going to click and re-drag that joint, rotate up, make sure it's in the center of my shoulder, and then start to rotate. See, we're moving way too much of our ribs, so I'm going to remask those ribs out. With my lasso brush, I'm going to left click and hold Control left click and blur that mask just a little bit. And then I'm going to rotate those arms, so now our ribs aren't being as affected. And there's always going to be some cleanup here, right? Like this is looking pretty wonky, but we're going to just go in and remodel that. So let's Alt-Tab and see how much we have to push this. His arms are relaxed down to his side of the elbow and then kind of bent a little bit at the elbow, and then he's holding this fish. So I'm going to bend my arms back just a smidge. I think that's looking good. And now I'm going to Control, left click and drag a lasso around his upper arm, and then re-drag my joints at the elbow and bend those arms just a little. And be careful not to make sure that your thumbs are touching or intersecting, because that can break this process a little bit. Let's make sure that our joint is in the center of that elbow so that we can click on the center circle, the inner white circle on that, and then rotate. And like I said earlier, you want to try not to intersect these, because otherwise you're going to have this issue here. So let's undo, rotate these out just a little bit, and then click rotate. And now we're starting to see his arms rotate in a little bit. I'm going to smooth this by left clicking. So all of your regular brushes apply using transpose. So we can still do our work at this level. Just make sure that you remember you're only posing the character at this point. And we're going to still refine these details back in our other subtool. So I still want to rotate his forearms just a little bit, so I'm going to mask, drag a mask here and blur that mask. And then redraw my joints. Oops. And then move that to the center. And the way I'm moving this is grabbing this outer circle as opposed to the inner circle. Those do two different things. So now I've got his hands sufficiently rotated, and I'm going to Alt-Tab over to my concept, make sure I'm looking all right. Looks like his hands are probably touching close to the thumbs. So I'm going to rotate his thumbs in a little bit by Control left clicking and dragging along those normals. Make sure I got the bottom side, reposition my joints, and then rotate that in like so. And push that a little bit. Cool. So now I can come back up here to the elbow and do the same thing and get those a little bit closer together. And we want maybe not so much bend in his arms. We want this to be a big fish and to imply that there's some good weight to it. So his arms are going to be a little bit straighter. And now let's come back up here and start fixing our weird deformations in his pec area and his traps. And let's hunch him down a little bit more. Do a little bit of subtle smooth in the creasing here. I am not even using my stylus, how about that? I sometimes forget that I have this super expensive Cintiq and I just get clicking away like old school because I'm an old man in this business. Okay, and move topological works well for this kind of stuff. So if you don't want to affect the rib cage necessarily, but you want to affect just the bicep area, use that. I love that brush. So we're just cleaning up these deformations because your muscles don't do what polygons do. He's probably a little bit too trapped up here. He's not a bodybuilder per se. Let's look at our concepts again. Okay, so his neck is definitely skinnier. Let's try to achieve that. He's not doing his shoulder shrugs with his dumbbells by any means. Okay, kind of an awkward flat area right there. His neck might be a smidge too long. Yeah, probably. Let's go back over to ZBrush, and then we will let's drop the length of the neck. So drawing a mask and control left clicking to blur the mask, inverting selection, coming back to our other transform gizmo, and then we'll move that into place and just kind of move his head down. And because the gizmo's in the way, I can't really left click and blur that mask so easily, so I'm going to come over here to masking, and this is just another way to blur your mask more easily. Remember to invert your selection sometimes, because that helps with that fall off. So we're starting to see his mouth bag coming through the geo. So with move topological, I'm just going to grab those points and push those up out of the way. Bring his neck down just a little. Alright, cool. Alt tabbing over, see what we got. Looking good. Now for the fun part, let's start to bend his legs, which is a pretty drastic maneuver. And one thing you'll notice that we lost all of our fun polygrouping work when we moved over to transpose master, and that's fine. We'll just try to drag these masks out a little bit better like this. So right now we've got, I'm just control left clicking, and you can do this with this current gizmo as well. You don't have to just use the legacy gizmo to control left click drag along the normals, but I prefer to use, when I'm posing, I prefer to use the legacy gizmo more so. So control left click tap to blur that, and then moving our transform gizmo into place. Oops, sometimes it's easy to click that away. And just remember, like, we're just essentially creating a temporary rig for our character. So with ZBrush is so fancy, you don't have to necessarily go through that whole process just to get a character posed. And we're going to need to spread these legs apart because he's basically almost in a full split with his thigh area. And we're starting to tip or rotate our legs inward. So I'm going to re-drag my joints out, and then make sure they're in the right. This can be a very handsy process. You got to be patient. Make sure that that is in the pivot area that I want. So right there in the pelvis, and then click on the center white circle and rotate that in. And it's doing some weird stuff with our geo, so we're just going to smooth that out. So there's going to be a fair amount of sculpting cleanup after the fact once we get into our once we go back to our ZTL. So just be aware of that. This is kind of a handsy process. And again, we want to avoid rigging at all costs. So fix the crotch area. Let's do this. Let's come back up to our arms and control left click drag and drag until we're just on those arms. Blur our mask a good amount. And then let's rotate these arms forward just a little bit to get those out of the way of those legs. It's very easy to move those joints around by accident, so just be aware. And okay, using move topological right now. And his legs are still probably pivoted outwards too much, so control left clicking and dragging along those loops, blurring my mask. Oops. Sometimes it's very easy to click this clear mask button while you're clicking that a bunch of times. Okay. And I want to rotate these legs inward like so. There we go. Okay. So now I want to bend those knees. So we're going to control left click around the knee right there with the lasso. We're going to move our joints into place. And because there's not a lot of polygons, when we hit the blur mask, it's going to blur it quite a bit. So there's going to be a lot of cleanup at this knee area. So we're going to rotate those inward. Looking super goofy, huh? Looking pretty goofball-y. So let's clear our mask and start cleaning this up using the move topological brush. Just start to kind of pinch these together more, and then their secret weapon is going to be the inflate brush. If we come over here to brushes and go to inflate, we're going to just inflate that in so that creases nicely. Going back to move topological and adding a little bit of a curve in that femur, thigh area. Okay. And we still have this weird kind of S bend right here, and we don't want that. We want them to be pretty much fully hunched. So let's take a look. So there's definitely more of just a C curve hunch right there. So we're going to drag right there to our loop that we don't like, and then give us a little bit of a back joint area, and then we're going to rotate the pelvis forward just a little bit. And don't worry about this intersection for now. We'll fix this. We'll come up here, and maybe what we're going to do is we'll rotate the entire character this way a little bit, and then re-drag our lasso on the neck and kind of just reposition that head to where we want it, looking upward. Clear our mask, and then we'll drag a mask for our arms. Sometimes you got to adjust the angle of your camera. I find that helps. Switching to the legacy transpose tool, and then control F clicking and dragging. And then we want to maintain these shoulder muscles, so we're going to come back here, and you can actually go to grow mask. In this case, we want to shrink the mask. Let's do this. So this is where we were at. I'm not sure if I covered this undo history thing here too. You can see all of your undos up here, and you can drag this little box left to right to go through those. Sometimes it's a hindrance if you're up here clicking around. You'll accidentally click down here, so just be aware of that. If we want to go forward to where we were, we can go right here. And within this little box, there's several undos. You can see the number and the count adjust as we go. I'm getting a little bit sidetracked. So let's shrink our mask a little bit more. I think we've got enough of that. You can hold control and go to your mask pen, and you can just paint on a mask too. We don't want any of that stuff to be influenced by our move. And then Control Alt will invert that mask coloring. So we can grab the shoulder, and then Control left clicking will blur that mask. And we're just going to switch back to our transpose and then rotate that out just a little bit. Oops, we have our thumbs intersecting, so be careful with that. And if you hold Shift, it'll snap it to the different axes. So we want that to snap right there. And again, we're losing kind of the weight that we had before, this jumbo fish that he's caught. So we want to maintain that in the form of the shoulders up here and along his back. We're starting to see this guy look more like our concept, and he's more in line with the pose. And we can always go back to Transpose Master after the fact and kind of just, we're losing some of our anatomy here, so I'm just kind of trying to bring some of this back. A little bit of a crease where the tummy is going to be. And maybe we want to give him just a little bit of a belly, Okay. So our feet now need to be, well, let's fix our knees here and point those this way. Again, adding a little bit of a bow to our femur area and giving him a little bit of a butt back, and then increasing the arch along his back spine. Okay, and coming back here to inflate and just inflating his calf muscle back in. It's okay that these are intersecting. And it might help sometimes to just try to get in pose yourself and see what your feet do and see what your different parts do. Use your own body for reference. So we're bending these feet up now, so he's kind of standing on the tips of his toes and on the palms of his feet palms, if you will. I'm going to try to add some density to those. And he's going to be standing on this rock. He's definitely looking more like a Gollum type character now. I think we want to, if we go back to our concept, his legs are basically in contact almost all the way to his butt. So his heels should be up, and we need to bend his knees even more. So we're going to do that in the pose here, clicking and dragging that mask along. And this might take 3 or 4 attempts to get this mask to work properly as intended. So like right now, if you look at the back, it's masked in a weird way. So it'll get there. You just got to keep practicing. I've just been doing this for years and years. I'm going to come over here to my move topological, because when I bend those up, those heels are going to start to touch, and that's going to be a problem. So, okay, so now let's reposition our joint structure and pull these guys up a good amount. Sometimes you can come into here even when they do intersect and just do a smooth, and it'll separate those out. So holding the shift button, I'm just smoothing these. And now we're again getting more in line with where we want to be, and scaling up my brush size and using my move topological to handle the rest of this, to kind of push it the rest of the way. Very nice. Now he's more more flexible, more bendy kind of a character. He's been doing his yoga. Good for him. I mean, what else are you gonna do? You live in a cave. You eat fish. You just covet this ring so much. And I don't know how I'm gonna include that ring, to be honest. I don't even know how he really keeps it, because it seems like he kind of just whips it out of his loincloth or something. And like, where does he keep it? Because he doesn't have the necklace. He has the necklace when Frodo has the necklace. So I'm not really sure how he keeps the coin. Maybe he just like keeps it in his mouth or something, like a weirdo. Okay, so let's straighten these arms a little bit and kind of just like try to make these look like he's holding more weight. Bring his throat up like that. And we can also come down here and start kind of posing his fingers. So I'm going to click down the edge loops here and rotate in like his middle finger and bend that in, and do the same with his others. This is where it gets a little bit tedious. But again, we've been doing this for like 20 minutes, and we've pretty much already got this guy in pose. Obviously, you might need to take a little bit longer just because this is your first time. And that's totally fine. Be patient with yourself and your learning. And take a breath. Just take a breath. Just remember how much fun you're having and how much you're not thinking about all the craziness in our world today. You're just enjoying life and just modeling stuff. I kind of like his pinkies are straighter, but I'm still going to bend those in just a little. My pivot is off, so we'll replace the pivot. And okay, and there's a little bit of a bow in those arms, and I'm not digging too much of a bow. So let's imagine he's got a fish there. It's pretty heavy. It's kind of working. Looks like we've lost the length in our upper arms a little, so I'm going to pull those down with a nice broad. You can see how much I use the move topological brush. I think that's definitely an overlooked brush that people don't know much about. And let's drag these shoulders even further down. It's very hunchy. That's all this guy does. He's kind of like a chimpanzee a little bit. That's actually probably a great reference to look for. Just going to arch this back. Okay, Alt-Tab over to our reference and see how we're doing. And this knee is almost kind of pointing downward. So, but that's at the point where we're getting into asymmetry mode. So we're like, we've turned off our symmetrical modeling. We're starting to switch into asymmetry mode. And I don't want to do that just yet. I'm not quite committed to that. Because that can get complicated down the road, but we will add some asymmetry to this character before we send him off to like print, but that is not this time. in the words of Aragorn. King Aragorn, if you will. Okay, I'm going to straighten these arms just a little bit more. Control left click drag. Reset our pivots. Rotate these guys down like so, just a little bit. And clear our mask. Bring these guys in. Okay, so now we're going to send this back to our other subtool. Well, 1 second. Sorry, I tend to get real picky with this part of the task. So I'm going to rotate these feet up, these toes up. Rotate this guy up. Okay. And bring the pads of his feet down, because he needs some surface area to balance on. All right, cool. We are ready to go with this guy. One thing I find too, when you're making display characters for 3D print, you're making miniatures or whatever, sometimes it's good to accentuate them looking up, almost to the point where it's a little awkward. Because once you get them printed, they're almost always going to look like they're looking down at the surface they're standing on. And I don't know why that is. I'm getting into some of the anatomy stuff here, just so you know, because we need these muscles to kind of behave appropriately. But it's sometimes nice, it's a good idea to cheat their heads looking up a little bit more. Because I promise you, once you print that, it's still going to look like they're looking down. It's just kind of the ways. Whoops, that's fun. That was fun. Unlock our pivot and then rotate that head up even more. And I think that's probably going to be good. Awesome. Okay, so we want to send this back to our other subtool. How do we do that? We come over here to Z plugin, back to our transpose master, and instead of clicking this button on the left, we're going to click this button on the right, and it's going to swap all of our subtools in nicely. And you see we've gotten our awesome poly groups, so we can still have control over those while we're posing and refining. But the only thing it did not do, if we turn on all of our visibility on all of our subtools, is our hair and our loincloth are out of the way. They maintained their original positioning. So we're gonna come back in and reposition those. It's gonna be just kind of handsy. We'll just have to position those in place just by moving those using the transform gizmo. We're gonna have to do some modeling to get those back to where we want them. So using the snake hook, let's make sure that your symmetry is turned on both sides by hitting X, and then getting that into place where we'd like it. And this is too thin for printing, so we'll come over here to deformation and go to inflate, and let's inflate that out a good amount, almost to the point where it just looks kind of weird, because when you print it, that's still going to be, you know, if I print this guy at 6 inches, that's still going to be pretty thin. You're going to be looking at, you know, like 1/8 of an inch or less in thickness there. So just keep that in mind. Always try and think about the scale that you're printing. Now let's get his mullet / wig and get that into place. Reset our pivot, and then rotate this like so and get that guy into place. So the backs of our hairs definitely need to be manipulated, because they are intersecting now with our neck. And overall, we still need to go and do a refining pass on this hair. But I figured at some point we just needed to get him into pose, and then we can really start to polish things as we go. Okay. Awesome. Okay, so we've now got him into pose, and this is a great time to version up, so I would not save. Intentionally do not save, because we want to maintain and secure that state of that T-pose character, but we do want to save as and create a new version of our, excuse me, I gotta locate our Gollum character. I don't even know if I'm spelling Gollum correctly, but I know. Alright, so saving, versioning up, and this is our character. And so we have all of our subdivision levels. We didn't lose any of those, but we definitely have some wonkiness with our anatomy, so we'll try to bring some of that back. And again, sometimes it's just best to work in the lower subdivision levels when you're moving larger forms around. So hit Shift D to drop down. We don't want his pecs to come to weird points. We don't want him to have, you know, saggy pecs. He's been doing some strenuous working out. I mean, what else are you gonna do when you're in a cave alone with fish? I think Gollum was like hundreds of years old. Just so you know. And correct me if I'm wrong, but he's an old dude. The ring gave him extended life. So we lost some of our collarbone, so I'm just kind of trying to bring that stuff back, bringing back some of this anatomy, and turning on solo to get the hair out of the way, and then going back to the standard brush and going down a subdivision level or two. And his traps are just, he's too jacked, so I tend to do that with my characters. It's kind of wishful thinking for myself, I guess. I wish I had those, so I make all my characters a little bit too jacked. Straightening out these tendons and dropping down the traps, getting rid of some of the mass in those. So, okay, hitting D, going back up, smoothing out some of these. And the nice thing is we are just about done with requiring a clean topology. So these weird artifacts we're seeing in our topology, we might be able to do away with those once we move into Dynamesh phase. So continuing to add the creases, and yeah, he's using the standard brush just to push those in still. It's always good to step back and see where the shadowing kind of rolls across the surface to see how our large forms are doing. And cool. All right, turning off solo mode so we can see everything in context. Looks like we need to bring the loincloth out just a little. I thought about giving him like some like shorts underneath this, just because, I mean, he's a younger Gollum and he probably didn't give up on clothes right away. I'm gonna come over here and turn off my delete lower subdivision level. I'm gonna switch this loincloth into Dynamesh phase because I'm an animal. I'm a filthy animal. Turn it to 256 and hit Dynamesh. See, that's pretty low poly, so we're gonna have to double that at least. Go up to like 600. And now you're in Dynamesh phase. So what that did is that just gave us the polygons where we wanted them, similar to how we had the hair, or have the hair working. So we've moved over, we've committed at this point. The nice thing about ZBrush too is you can always go back into, hit Z remesh and you can move into clean topology phase and then back to Dynamesh, or if you want to project your details, you can do that. ZBrush is great for that stuff too. So just gonna use the Damien standard and continue to push some of the cloth detailing. I've turned off symmetry because I'm ready to move out of that mode. I don't want everything to look, perfectly symmetrical. So you can always kind of tell the difference between advanced artists and more beginner artists, because they love to just kind of a lot of times cut corners and just leave that symmetry on. But let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that mentality and move on, man. Okay, cool. All right, so we're getting pretty close. One thing I think, let's go back to our. I like that towards the contact points of the pelvis in the femur area, we get real skinny and then kind of inflate out at the knees and the calf area. So I think we've lost some of that. So I'm going to try to add some of that volume back right now. So using the snake hook brush, I'm just kind of pulling that up a little bit. and out, and then just finagling this stuff into a better spot. And then we want some sharper angles too on these knees, I think. These are just kind of jutting out. Okay. Continue to rotate around your model always as much as you possibly can. And if, you know, now that we have our polygroups nicely done, we can Control Shift left click on the verts and then invert that and start sending these other polygroups back. So we just want to try to get those legs to be the only things visible so that everything else is kind of out of the way. And then we can just work on these and get those arms out of the way. So that's one of the huge benefits of polygroups and using that workflow. So now, using the move topological, I am grabbing this, you know, as this flesh kind of makes contact, it kind of inflates out and squashes over each other. So one of the things I notice in the movies is when these things happen, these little deformations in the Gollum character, they just kind of intersect. They don't like squish against each other properly. I think that's like maybe a problem with a rig or something, or maybe, you know, it's probably budgetary, whatever. But we're going to try to achieve that feel as if they didn't just go right into each other. We don't have this T intersection. We have these guys actually squashing and kind of properly interacting with each other. So this is a good example of that. That doesn't look right. So I'm going to grab the move topological and kind of try to pull that in and then add some bulbousness to that, some roundness to that. So we're getting away from that. And if I control left click and control shift left click on a vert, we can get rid of that and then jump into this blue area and start to smooth that. Now go back, control shift left click, and we're starting to get a better transition here between these two geos. So this is inflating out and squashing over the top of this. And this thing, in order to get this to kind of clean in, we're just going to do an inflate. Love me a good inflate here. Okay, and the knees are too pointy. So there's going to be a lot of work to be done in this knee area to get those to look natural. So we'll probably be finagling that a lot. And I think we're now starting to get a better look in these legs. Turning on solo mode, let's make sure this is all looking good. So smoothing, using Damien standard to get bring that calf back, the calf detailing. And turning off polygroups. Now we're looking kind of awkwardly pinched here in the pelvic area. Pelvis is also a little bit high. I'm going to scoot that down a little bit. Using Damien standard to re-bring in some of these details. And maybe this little diamond area is now a little bit high, maybe stretched up the back. Getting back into our lat area. And remember, we got these, you know, little bumps here that need to be happening all the way up the spine. Hit D to go up a subdivision because we're losing some of that poly count we need. And yeah, getting pretty happy with this so far. Let's push this guy in. So at the back, let's add some wing, a little bit of wings here. You know, he's been climbing rocks a lot, so he's got some, I think these are called your lats. I don't know, man. I should really get more familiar with this anatomy as I'm trying to teach it. Okay, so Damien standard, just carve that in. So it's a mix of Damien standard and snake hook and smooth and move topological. These are the big hitters. And then we've kind of lost our trapezius detailing. So let's bring that back, shall we? Obviously we're accentuating his spine, but I like it. So we're pushing the detail just a little too much, and then smoothing it back as usual. And these are the traps coming in. And they have this little buckle right here. And they're coming in, and it pinches into this area, and then up the neck. Okay. So he's too ripped still, so I'm gonna shift D to go down a few subdivision levels, and then run a smooth, just because we want to get rid of some of the tonality. We want some of it in there, but you don't want to push it too much. Awesome. Okay, so down here we got a little awkward. I want to kind of crease this, so I'm going to use a Damien standard. I'm going to scale up my size, and then add this kind of crease here. And what we might want to do is use clay buildup and add a couple of creases. So go in there. He's got a little excess skin, and then Damien standard to push those in. Okay, awesome. Now I think we're at 45 minutes for this video, so we've pushed it a good amount on this guy. We're going to continue to refine this character as we move along here. In the next video, we'll add like probably a basic shape for our fish, and then also the base, and then we'll do one more video where we get it prepped for print. So I'm gonna hit save, and then just compare back against our concept. And he still might be a little bit more hunched. I might have shortened the length of his neck a little bit too much. His ears could probably be accentuated a little bit bigger. So I'm gonna sorry everyone who's pro mullet, but I'm gonna bring this up just a little because I like that profile in our concept to see the neck back there, and I like seeing these little bones jutting out of his neck. So we'll try to get that as best we can. I mean, you can add a mullet to your character if you want, but I'll leave some of these little stragglers. So yeah, a lot of this we'll just do a refining pass. We'll go through and clean this all up. But I think that for this video is good. We got him posed, and we kicked butt. Great job. Pat yourself on the back. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Get involved. Let me know where I could be doing better in the comments below, and also let me know what kinds of things you wanna learn to make. Did I breeze over some of the details too much? Should I have slowed down a little bit? Just fixing some of this little contact area. I'm having a hard time getting out of this. This is just enjoying it so much. And all right, so hitting save and signing off, and we will see you in the next one.